1 year after the battle for Earth, a ceremony was held on Gentari Prime. The planet was still healing. Cities were being rebuilt, but the scars remained. Entire sections of the world would take generations to recover. But the Gentari were survivors now, not just victims. Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the rebuilt capital city. The Gentari had constructed a monument here, a towering structure made of crystal that caught the light and threw it in all directions. It was beautiful and sad at the same time. Representatives from every council species had come for the dedication. Jake saw faces he knew. Captain Lisa Harper stood nearby, now commanding her own ship. General Henry Briggs was there with a delegation of Marines. Lieutenant Kyle Bennett wore dress uniform with a chest full of medals. The monument bore thousands of names carved in dozens of languages. Human names, Gentari names, Valorian names, and more. These were the people who had died defending the innocent, the ones who had stood against tyranny and paid the ultimate price. Ziri stepped forward to speak. She was the Gentari teacher that Henry had rescued from the Krell ship. In the year since then, she had become a leader among her people. She advocated for military training and defensive preparedness, ideas that once would have been unthinkable for a Gentari. Her speech was translated into all the council languages. "We were a peaceful people," she said. "We believed that reason and discussion could solve any problem. The Krell proved us wrong. They taught us that sometimes peace must be defended with force. When we cried for help, the Deathworlders answered. The humans did not ask what we could offer them. They did not hesitate or debate. They simply came, and they fought. And they bled for us. We will never forget that debt. And we will strive every day to be worthy of their sacrifice." Jake felt emotion tighten his throat. He had not expected this. The Gentari and all the other species turned to face him. As one, they saluted. It was not a military salute, but a gesture of respect and gratitude. Jake returned the salute. Around him, the other humans did the same. For a moment, the divisions between species disappeared. They were no longer separate civilizations sharing a galaxy. They were something more, a community. After the ceremony, Jake walked through the memorial gardens with Ambassador Telvin. The Valorian had become a good friend over the past year. They had worked together to build the Galactic Defense Initiative into something real and effective. "The Council has asked me to deliver a message," Telvin said. "They want to expand the Defense Initiative, regional fleets, better intelligence gathering, rapid response forces. And they want humanity to lead this effort." Jake stopped walking. "Why us?" Telvin smiled. "Because when others hesitate, you act. When others debate, you fight. When others despair, you hope. These are qualities the galaxy needs." Jake thought about that. A year ago, humans were the newcomers to the Council, barely tolerated by the older species. Now they were being asked to lead the defense of the entire galaxy. It was a huge responsibility. "What about the Krell?" Jake asked. "They're still out there." "Intelligence suggests they are rebuilding their forces," Telvin admitted. "They will attack again, but when they do, we will be ready. We are not the same council they faced before. We have learned. We have changed." Jake looked around at the memorial. He thought about all the people whose names were carved in crystal. They had given everything to protect others. Could he do any less? "Tell the council we accept," Jake said. "Humanity will do whatever is needed to defend the innocent." Telvin nodded, satisfied. "I knew you would say that." Over the following months, the defense initiative grew. New ships were built combining technology from multiple species. Training centers opened on dozens of worlds. Species that had never worked together before learned to fight side by side. The Gentari military force grew from a few hundred volunteers to several thousand. They would never be warriors by choice, but they were warriors by necessity. Henry continued to train them, adapting human tactics to work with their unique physiology and abilities. One day, a young Gentari recruit named Kess approached Henry after training. "General Briggs, may I ask you something?" "Sure, Kess. What is it?" "Why do humans fight for others? Your species could stay safe on your death world. Why risk your lives?" For aliens you barely know? Henry thought about that question. He remembered the distress signal from Gentari Prime. He remembered Jake's decision to disobey orders and help anyway. He remembered all the Marines who had died fighting for people who were not even human. Because it's the right thing to do, Henry said finally. On Earth we have a saying. We judge a society by how it treats those who cannot defend themselves. If we hear someone calling for help and do nothing, what does that say about us? Kes thought about that. We used to believe that violence was never the answer, that there was always a peaceful solution. But the Krell taught us differently. Peace is always the goal, Henry said. But sometimes you have to fight to protect it. That's not a contradiction. That's just reality. Kes nodded slowly. I understand now why Teacher Ziri admires your people so much. You have strength, but you use it to protect the weak instead of dominating them. That's what we try to do, Henry said. We don't always succeed. Humans make mistakes too, but we keep trying. Aboard the Unity, Jake received regular intelligence reports about Krell activity. They were out there watching and waiting, building their strength, planning their next move. It was only a matter of time before they attacked again. But this time would be different. The Council was ready. They had a unified military force. They had trained soldiers from dozens of species. Most importantly, they had learned not to hesitate when action was needed. Jake stood on the observation deck of the Unity, looking out at the fleet. Hundreds of ships from different worlds, all working together. It was something that would have been impossible a year ago. But the Krell attack had changed everything. Lisa joined him at the window. The fleet is ready, Admiral. Whatever comes next, we can handle it. Jake smiled. You sound confident. I am, Lisa said. Because I've seen what happens when different species work together. We're stronger as a community than any of us are alone. Jake thought about the journey that had brought them here. It had started with a simple distress call and a decision to help. That decision had cost lives and nearly ended his career. But it had also saved an entire species and changed the galaxy forever. The Krell would return. There would be more battles, more losses, more difficult choices. But Jake was not afraid. Because he knew that when the darkness came, they would face it together. All across the galaxy on hundreds of different worlds, new recruits trained for the battles to come. Some were human, tough, and determined. Others were Gentari, learning to overcome their peaceful nature. Still others were from species that had never known war until the Krell forced them to learn. They trained together, fought together, and when necessary, died together. Because they had learned the most important lesson the humans brought to the galaxy. When someone cries for help, you do not debate or hesitate. You answer the call. You rush toward danger when others flee. You stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. That was what it meant to be a defender. And in a galaxy threatened by enemies like the Krell, defenders were exactly what was needed. Jake looked at the stars and felt a sense of purpose. The road ahead would be difficult. There would be setbacks and losses. But as long as there were people willing to fight for what was right, hope remained. And somewhere out in the darkness, the next distress signal was waiting. When it came, Jake and his fleet would be ready, because that was what Deathworlders did. They answered when others cried for help. Always. 6 months had passed since the battle at Gentari Prime. The Galactic Defense Initiative fleet was finally coming together. 300 ships from 20 different species trained together, learning to fight as one force. It was not easy. Each species had different ideas about tactics and strategy. But slowly, they were learning. Admiral Jake Morrison watched the training exercises from the bridge of the Unity. Ships moved in coordinated patterns, practicing attack runs and defensive formations. They were getting better, but Jake worried it would not be enough. The Krell had been quiet for months. Too quiet. Intelligence reports suggested they were building up their forces. Something big was coming. Jake could feel it. Then, on a Tuesday morning, the attack came. Alarms woke Jake from a restless sleep. He ran to the bridge, still pulling on his uniform. Captain Lisa Harper was already there, coordinating with the tactical stations. What's happening? Jake demanded. Krell attack fleets have appeared in 3 different systems, Lisa said. Her face was pale. Over 500 ships total. They're hitting the Valorian homeworld, the Dracon mining colonies, and Earth. Jake felt his stomach drop. Earth. They were attacking Earth. And the Defense Initiative fleet could not defend all 3 locations at once. They had to choose. Call an emergency meeting, Jake ordered. All senior commanders. Within minutes, holographic images of commanders from different species filled the conference room. They all looked worried. The Valorian commander spoke first, pleading for Jake to defend his homeworld. The Dracon representative argued that losing their mining colonies would cripple the Council's economy. Admiral Patricia Green, Earth's representative, said nothing. She just waited for Jake to make his decision. Jake studied the tactical displays. 3 targets, but only 1 fleet to defend them. If he split his forces, they would be too weak to stop any of the attacks. He had to concentrate everything on one objective. He made his choice. We're going to Earth. The room erupted. The Valorian commander protested. The Dracon representative demanded an explanation, but Jake raised his hand for silence. Earth has the strongest defenses. It has ground-based weapons that most worlds do not have, and its people have been fighting wars since before they had writing. If we can stop the Krell there, we send a message that they cannot win. It was a cold calculation, and Jake hated making it, but he knew it was the right choice strategically. The fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed, heading for Earth. They arrived just as the Krell armada was dropping out of their own faster-than-light travel. 200 Krell warships against the combined Council fleet and Earth's defenses. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison, Jake broadcast to the entire fleet. Today we fight not just for Earth, but for every world in the Council. The Krell think we are weak. Let's show them they're wrong. The fleet surged forward. Human ships led the way, their crews singing old war songs. The other Council species followed, inspired by their allies' courage. The battle was massive and chaotic. Hundreds of ships clashed in Earth's orbit. Railgun fire and plasma bolts filled the space between them. Missiles streaked through the darkness. Explosions lit up the battlefield like deadly fireworks. Earth's orbital defense platforms added their firepower. Railguns that humanity had built decades ago roared to life, firing slugs that could punch through starship armor. Missile batteries on the moon launched their payloads, targeting Krell formations. The Krell had expected a defensive battle. Instead, they faced an aggressive assault that threw their careful plans into chaos. The Council fleet fought with a ferocity that surprised everyone, including themselves. But the Krell had numbers on their side. Despite heavy losses, they pushed through the outer defensive line. Dropships began heading toward Earth's surface, ready to deploy ground troops. That was when Earth's surface defenses activated. Surface to orbit. Missiles hidden in bunkers around the world launched in waves. Fighter jets scrambled from air bases, their pilots ready to defend their home. The sky filled with contrails as humanity showed why Deathworlders were not to be taken lightly. General Henry Briggs watched the battle from his command carrier. He had been promoted after Gentari Prime and now commanded all ground forces. But the battle was in space, and there was nothing his Marines could do except wait. Then he saw an opportunity. The Krell flagship, a massive dreadnought coordinating the enemy attack, was exposed. If they could take it out, the Krell fleet would lose cohesion. Admiral Morrison, I have a plan, Henry said over the command channel. Let me guess, Jake replied. Boarding action? It worked before. Jake looked at the tactical display. It was a desperate plan. The flagship was heavily defended. Any boarding craft would be torn apart by point defense fire, but desperate times called for desperate measures. Do it, Jake said. The fleet will provide cover fire. Henry gathered 6,000 Marines from 4 different species. They loaded into boarding craft and launched toward the Krell flagship. The Council fleet concentrated their fire on the enemy ship's defenses, trying to create an opening. The enemy point defense guns tore into the boarding craft. Explosions filled the space between the ships. Half the craft were destroyed before they reached their target, but the rest made it through. The Marines poured into the Krell flagship. The fighting was brutal. Every corridor was a battle. Every room was contested, but the Marines pushed forward, refusing to stop. Lieutenant Kyle Bennett led a strike team toward the bridge. He had been promoted after his actions at Gentari Prime. Now he was one of the best combat leaders in the fleet. They fought their way through the ship, taking heavy casualties. Kyle lost half his team before they reached the bridge. But they made it. The Krell Supreme Commander was waiting. He was even bigger than the commander at Gentari Prime, wearing ceremonial armor covered in battle honors. Elite guards surrounded him, the best warriors the Krell had. The battle was fierce. Kyle's team fought with everything they had: grenades, rifles, plasma cutters, even hand-to-hand combat. One by one, the guards fell. Then it was just Kyle and the Supreme Commander. They circled each other. The commander was stronger and better armed, but Kyle was faster and more determined. He dodged the commander's blade and struck back with his combat knife, finding gaps in the armor. The commander fell. Kyle stood over him, breathing hard, his armor dented and scarred. Around him lay the bodies of his friends and enemies alike, but they had won. Kyle activated the ship's communication system. "Your commander is dead. Your flagship is ours. Withdraw now or die." The effect was immediate. Krell ships began breaking off from the battle. Some tried to continue fighting, but without coordination. They were picked off one by one. Within an hour, the remaining Krell fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed and fled. Earth was saved, but the cost was terrible. 30 Council ships were destroyed. Thousands of crew members were dead. Parts of Earth's orbital infrastructure were in ruins. Jake stood on the bridge of the Unity, looking down at his homeworld. The planet was scarred but surviving, and more importantly, the Krell had been defeated. Their aura of invincibility was broken. News came in from the other systems. The Krell attacks there had been smaller, diversionary forces. Local defenses had held them off long enough for reinforcements to arrive. The Council had survived. But everyone knew this was just the beginning. The Krell would be back, and next time, they would be ready for the Council's new military strength. Still, something had changed. The Galactic Council was no longer a collection of peaceful species hoping danger would pass them by. They had learned to fight. They had learned to defend themselves. And they had learned it from the humans, the Deathworlders who answered when others cried for help. Technical Sergeant Rachel Monroe was the specialist they needed. She was an expert in alien computer systems, someone who could make sense of technology no human had ever seen before. When Henry called for her, she came running with her portable equipment. Rachel looked at the Krell control interface. It was nothing like human technology. The symbols were strange, and the system seemed to respond to both touch and sound. But Rachel had worked with dozens of alien systems over the years. She knew how to find patterns. "Give me some time," she said. "This is complicated." Henry stood guard while Rachel worked. Around him, his Marines watched the doors. The Krell soldiers had fled after their commander died, but they might come back with reinforcements. 12 minutes passed. It felt like hours. Then Rachel made a sound of triumph. "Got it. I'm in their system. Can you shut down their weapons?" Henry asked. "Already done. Their main cannon is offline, and I've locked out their missile systems. But there's more here. Their database has information about their whole empire." Henry moved closer. "What kind of information?" Rachel's face was grim as she read the data. "The Krell Dominion is huge. They control dozens of star systems. They've destroyed more than 20 different species over the last 100 years. They see the Galactic Council as weak and easy to conquer. Are there more attacks planned?" Henry asked. "Yes, they have a list of targets. The Valorian homeworld, the Dracon mining colonies, and Earth. Earth is marked as a high-priority target because of our military capabilities." Henry felt cold. The Krell were planning to attack Earth itself. "Can you recall their troops from the surface?" Rachel nodded. "I can fake a recall order using the commander's voice. They won't know it's not him until it's too late. Do it." Rachel worked quickly, synthesizing the commander's voice from recorded communications. She broadcast the recall order on all Krell frequencies. Within minutes, dropships began lifting off from the planet's surface. The Krell ground forces were retreating. Henry contacted the Valiant. "Captain Morrison, target is secured. Enemy commander is dead. Their troops are withdrawing from the planet. Jake's voice came back, filled with relief. Good work, Henry. Get your people back here. We're not out of this yet. Henry gathered his Marines and they made their way back to the breach. The enemy ship was eerily quiet now. The remaining Krell soldiers had abandoned their posts. The Marines reached the Valiant without further combat. Once everyone was aboard, Jake ordered the ship to pull away from the captured Krell flagship. The second enemy ship, damaged and leaderless, jumped to faster-than-light speed and fled the system. The battle was over. Jake stood on the bridge and looked at the planet below. The Gentari homeworld was scarred and burning, but it was still there. Millions had died, but millions more had survived, because the Valiant had answered their call for help. Captain, we're receiving a message from the planet's surface, Kevin said. Put it through. A Gentari appeared on the view screen. He was old, his crystalline shell clouded with age. Translator text appeared below his image. I am Elder Ven. I speak for what remains of our government. You saved us. We do not have words sufficient to express our gratitude. You risked everything for a species not your own. Jake felt uncomfortable with the praise. We did what anyone should do. You called for help. We came. No, Elder Ven said softly. The council debated while we died. Only you acted. We will never forget this. The transmission ended. Jake sat down in his command chair, suddenly exhausted. They had won, but the cost was high. 17 crew members were dead. 43 were wounded. The ship was heavily damaged. And when the council found out what he had done, his career would be over. But as Jake looked at his crew, he saw pride on their faces. They had done the right thing. That was all that mattered. 3 days later, a council fleet arrived. 20 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and formed up around the Valiant. Jake prepared for the worst. He had violated direct orders, engaged an unknown enemy without authorization, and could have started a major war. Ambassador Telvan came aboard with a delegation. They toured the damaged sections of the ship. They spoke with the crew. They reviewed the tactical recordings. Jake waited for them to place him under arrest. Finally, Telvan called Jake to the conference room. The ambassador's face was unreadable. Captain Morrison, your actions were in clear violation of council protocols. You disobeyed direct orders. You risked your ship and crew. You engaged an unknown enemy without intelligence or backup. Jake stood at attention. Yes, sir. I understand. Telvan was quiet for a moment. Then he did something Jake never expected. He extended his hand in the human gesture of respect. You also saved an entire species from extinction. Thousands of Gentari are alive because you refused to wait for permission. The council will debate your actions for weeks. Some will call for punishment. But I believe you did exactly what needed to be done. Jake took the ambassador's hand, too surprised to speak. The galaxy is changing, Captain, Telvan continued. The Krell Dominion has shown us that peace cannot be maintained through discussion alone. Sometimes action is required. The Council needs to learn this lesson, and you have given us a very clear example. Over the following weeks, everything changed. The Galactic Council held emergency sessions. For the first time in their history, they voted to create a unified military force. The Galactic Defense Initiative was born. The Gentari changed too. Ziri, the teacher who Henry had rescued, became an advocate for her people. She argued that pacifism was a luxury they could no longer afford. A small group of Gentari volunteered to train as soldiers. It went against everything their culture believed, but they knew it was necessary. Henry was assigned to train them. It was strange at first. The Gentari were not built for combat. They were small and fragile compared to humans, but they were smart and determined. They learned quickly. One day, Henry watched a class of Gentari recruits practicing tactical movements. They would never be warriors like humans were, but they were taking control of their own fate. They were refusing to be victims. Jake was promoted to admiral despite the controversy. He was given command of the new Defense Initiative fleet, 300 ships from 20 different species, all working together to protect the Council from threats like the Krell. His flagship was the UESS Unity, a massive carrier built with technology from multiple species. It was a symbol of the new cooperation between Council members, but Jake knew the Krell would return. The captured database made that clear. They were planning something bigger, a coordinated assault on multiple Council worlds. The question was not if they would attack, but when. Jake stood on the bridge of the Unity looking out at the fleet under his command. Ships from dozens of different species all working together. It was something he never thought he would see. Lisa Harper, now promoted to captain and his second-in-command again, stood beside him. "Do you think we're ready?" she asked. Jake thought about that. The fleet was still learning to work together. Many species had never fought a battle before. They were inexperienced and uncertain, but they were here. They had chosen to stand and fight instead of hoping danger would pass them by. That counted for something. "We'll be as ready as we can be," Jake said. "And when the Krell come, we'll show them what happens when you threaten the people we protect." The Valiant's railguns hammered the enemy flagship, creating a breach in its hull. Lieutenant Colonel Henry Briggs stood in the airlock with 30 Marines behind him. They wore full combat armor and carried enough weapons to start a small war. "Remember your training," Henry said over the squad channel. "Stay together, watch your corners, and don't die. The captain is counting on us." The airlock opened. Space lay before them, dark and cold. The enemy ship was only 50 meters away, its hull torn open by railgun fire. Henry activated his magnetic boots and thruster pack. "Go, go, go!" The Marines launched themselves into the void. Henry led the way, his rifle ready. Behind him, 30 warriors flew through space toward the enemy. It was terrifying and beautiful at the same time. The enemy ship's point defense guns opened fire. Tracers filled the space between the ships. 3 Marines were hit and spun away into the darkness. Henry gritted his teeth and kept moving. They were almost there. He reached the breach and pulled himself inside. The Marines followed, streaming into the enemy ship one by one. The interior was dark and strange. The walls seemed to pulse with a sickly light. The air smelled wrong, like chemicals and something else Henry could not identify. "Form up," Henry ordered. 2 columns, advance on my mark." The Marines moved down the corridor. It was narrow and twisted in ways that made no sense. Henry kept his rifle up, ready for contact. He did not have to wait long. The enemy soldiers came around a corner. They were tall, nearly 7 feet, with segmented armor covering their bodies. Their heads were hidden behind helmets with glowing red visors. They carried weapons that fired superheated plasma. "Contact," Henry shouted. Both sides opened fire. Plasma bolts and rifle rounds filled the corridor. The noise was deafening. Henry dove behind a bulkhead as plasma scorched the wall where his head had been a second before. Sergeant Kyle Bennett was right beside him. Kyle was a veteran, scarred and tough. He leaned out and fired a burst, dropping 1 enemy soldier. "They're good," he said, "but they fight like robots. No improvisation." Henry nodded. He had noticed the same thing. The enemy moved in perfect formation, following patterns. But humans had learned to fight in chaos, in situations where there were no rules and no patterns. "Flank them," Henry ordered. "Second squad, go left. First squad, suppress." The Marines moved like they had trained for years because they had. First squad laid down heavy fire, keeping the enemy pinned. Second squad slipped down a side corridor and came up behind the enemy position. The enemy soldiers never saw it coming. Caught in a crossfire, they fell quickly. Henry waited until the shooting stopped, then moved forward. The corridor ahead split in 2 directions. "Kyle, take half the team and secure our exit route. I'm taking the rest deeper into the ship." "You sure about that, sir?" Kyle asked. "No," Henry admitted. "But we need to find something important. Engines, weapons control, their bridge. Something we can use." Kyle nodded and took his squad back toward the breach. Henry led the remaining Marines deeper into the enemy ship. They moved carefully, checking every corner, every doorway. The ship was like a maze with passages going in all directions. They found the holding cells by accident. One of the Marines tried a door and it opened. Inside were Gentari prisoners. There were maybe 20 of them, huddled together in the darkness. Their crystalline shells were cracked and stained with blue blood. One of the Gentari stepped forward. She was small, even for her species, and she held a translation device in her clawed hands. "You are human," she said. The words came out in a series of clicks, but the device translated them. "You came to help us." "That's right," Henry said. "What's your name?" "I am called Ziri. These are my students. We were teaching at the university when the attack came." Henry looked at the young Gentari. They were just children, really. They should have been learning and playing, not locked in a cell on an enemy warship. He felt anger burn in his chest. "Can you tell me about these attackers?" Henry asked. "Who are they?" "They call themselves the Krell Dominion," Ziri said. "They came without warning. They said we were weak and that our world now belonged to them. We tried to negotiate, to reason with them, but they just laughed. Then they started bombing our cities." Henry felt sick. The Gentari were pacifists. They probably did not even understand the concept of war until it was destroying their civilization. "Where is the command center on this ship?" Henry asked. Ziri pointed down the corridor. "That way, deep in the ship. There is a large chamber where their leader gives orders." Henry turned to Corporal Danny Lopez. "Get these people back to the Valiant. Use the route we came in. Kyle will cover your exit." "What about you, sir?" Danny asked. "I'm going to have a conversation with the Krell commander." Danny looked like he wanted to argue, but he knew better. "Yes, sir. Good hunting." Henry watched as Danny led the Gentari away. Then he turned to his remaining Marines. There were only 10 of them left. "Follow me, and be ready for anything." They moved through the ship, fighting their way past enemy soldiers. Each battle was quick and brutal. The Marines were outnumbered, but they were better trained and more adaptable. They used grenades to clear rooms and smoke to cover their movements. Finally, they reached a set of large doors. Behind those doors, Henry could hear voices. He signaled his Marines to take positions, then he kicked the doors open. The command center was huge. Holographic displays floated in the air, showing maps and tactical data. Enemy soldiers stood at control stations coordinating the attack on the planet below. And in the center of it all stood the Krell commander. He was massive, easily 8 feet tall, wearing ornate armor covered in symbols. His helmet had a transparent faceplate, and Henry could see his face. It was angular and cruel, with eyes that glowed like embers. The commander turned to face the Marines. A smile crossed his face. He spoke through a translator, his voice deep and rumbling. "So, the humans. We have heard stories about your kind. Warriors from a savage world. How interesting that you would throw your lives away for these pathetic insects." Henry did not bother with a response. He raised his rifle and fired. The round hit the commander's helmet, cracking it, but not penetrating. The commander's smile widened. "I see. No words, only violence. Very well. Let me show you how the Krell fight." The commander drew a sword from his back. It was as long as Henry was tall, and it crackled with energy. He moved faster than something his size should be able to move. In 3 quick strides, he was among the Marines. The sword swung in a wide arc. 2 Marines could not dodge in time. The blade cut through their armor like it was paper. They fell, dead before they hit the ground. The other Marines opened fire, but the commander had some kind of energy shield. The bullets bounced off harmlessly. He laughed and charged again. Henry saw what was happening. They could not fight this thing head-on. He needed a different approach. He grabbed a flashbang grenade from his belt and threw it at the commander's feet. The grenade exploded in a blast of light and sound. The commander staggered, temporarily blinded. Henry did not waste the opportunity. He rushed in close, inside the reach of that terrible sword. Up close, Henry could see a weak point in the armor. There was a gap at the neck where the chest plate met the helmet. Henry pulled out his plasma cutter, a tool normally used for repairs. He jammed it into that gap and activated it. The commander screamed. His shield flickered and died. He dropped his sword and grabbed at Henry, but Henry rolled away. The remaining Marines opened fire, their bullets now finding their target. The commander fell to his knees, then collapsed, face first on the floor. The command center fell silent. The enemy soldiers at the control station stood frozen, staring at their fallen leader. Henry stood up, breathing hard. He looked around at his Marines. 2 were dead and several more were wounded, but they had won. "Secure the room," Henry ordered, "and find me someone who can work these computers." The Gentari system looked like a graveyard. Thousands of pieces of wreckage floated in space around the planet. What used to be orbital stations and defense platforms were now just twisted metal and shattered crystal. Jake could see the remains of ships' habitats and solar collectors all destroyed. "Sweet mercy," Lisa whispered. She was looking at her tactical display and her face was pale. 3 massive ships orbited the planet. They were huge, at least twice the size of the Valiant. Their hulls were dark and angular, like the shells of predatory insects. These were not exploration vessels or cargo haulers. These were warships built for one purpose only. "Captain, those ships are launching drop pods toward the surface," Lisa reported. "They're still attacking." Jake looked at the planet on the view screen. He could see the scars on its surface, great black marks where cities used to be. Fires burned across entire continents. The Gentari had built their civilization over thousands of years, and now it was being destroyed in a single day. "Hail them," Jake ordered. "All frequencies." Kevin sent out the message, broadcasting it in every known language. There was no response. The enemy ships continued their assault as if the Valiant did not exist. "They've detected us," Lisa said. 2 of them are breaking orbit. They're coming this way." Jake had seconds to make a decision. He could run. The Valiant was fast and they might be able to escape. He could report what he found and let the Council handle it. That would be the smart choice. But Jake had not come all this way to run. He looked at Lisa. She nodded. They both knew what had to be done. Red alert. All weapons online. "Amy, get us into attack position." Alarms blared throughout the ship. The crew moved to their battle stations. The Valiant's railguns charged with a deep humming sound. Missile tubes loaded. Shield generators powered up. "Send them one more message," Jake said. His voice was cold and hard. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Star ship Valiant. You are attacking a Council member world. Power down your weapons and leave immediately or we will open fire." For a moment nothing happened. Then one of the enemy ships fired. Bright green bolts of plasma streaked through space toward the Valiant. Each bolt was as hot as the surface of a star. "Evasive maneuvers," Jake shouted. Amy's hands flew over her controls. The Valiant banked hard to the left, its massive frame twisting through space. The plasma bolts missed by meters. Jake felt the ship shake as the inertial dampeners struggled to compensate for the extreme movement. "Return fire," Jake ordered. The Valiant's railguns spoke with a deep boom that rattled through the ship. Tungsten slugs, each one weighing several tons, shot out at incredible speed. They crossed the distance between the ships in seconds. The first enemy ship's shields flared bright blue as the slugs hit. The shields held for a moment, then one slug punched through. It tore into the ship's armor, ripping a hole in its side. Atmosphere vented out in a white cloud. "Direct hit," Lisa called out. "Their shields are down to 60%. The second enemy ship moved to flank them. Lisa saw it coming. "Launching missiles!" A dozen missiles erupted from the Valiant's tubes. They streaked toward the enemy ship, weaving and dodging. The enemy's point defense guns opened up, filling space with tracers. Most of the missiles exploded before reaching their target, but 3 got through. The explosions were massive. Each warhead carried enough explosive power to level a city block. The enemy ship shuddered as fire bloomed along its hull. Armor plating peeled away, exposing the inner structure. But the enemy was not finished. Both ships returned fire. Plasma bolts filled the space around the Valiant. Amy did her best to dodge, but the ship was big and the enemy fire was heavy. Several bolts hit home. The Valiant's shields flared and sparked. One section overloaded and a plasma bolt struck the hull directly. Metal melted and boiled away. Damage reports started coming in from all over the ship. "Fire on Deck 7. Hull breach in Section 12. Casualties reported." The damage control officer's voice was tense but steady. Dr. Mitchell's voice came over the intercom. "Medical teams responding." "Keep them coming." Jake gripped his armrest. The ship shook around him as more hits landed. "Amy, bring us in close." "I want point-blank range, sir." Amy looked back at him, surprised. "You heard me." "Get us right on top of them," Amy grinned. "Aye, Captain." The Valiant accelerated directly toward the nearest enemy ship. It was a crazy move, one that put them in even more danger. But at close range, the enemy's big guns would have trouble tracking them. And the Valiant's railguns would be devastatingly accurate. Amy brought them in so close that Jake could see individual windows on the enemy ship. The Valiant's railguns fired continuously now, pumping slug after slug into the enemy hull. At this range, the shields were almost useless. The tungsten rounds tore through armor like paper. The enemy ship tried to pull away, but Amy matched every move. She kept the Valiant locked on target, giving the weapons crews perfect firing solutions. Explosions rippled along the enemy hull as critical systems were hit. Then something bright appeared on the view screen. The third enemy ship, the one still in orbit, had turned to face them. Its main weapon was charging, a massive energy cannon in the center of its hull. The barrel glowed with building power. "Energy spike," Lisa shouted. "Captain, that thing is about to fire." "Amy, break off," Jake ordered. But it was too late. The enemy weapon fired. A beam of pure energy lanced across space. It was like nothing Jake had ever seen. A column of light so bright it hurt to look at. The beam hit the Valiant's shields and started burning through. Jake could feel the heat even through the hull. Alarms screamed. The lights flickered. "Shields failing," Lisa called out. "We can't take much more of this." Down in engineering, Chief Engineer Nathan Clark was working frantically. He shut down every system that was not absolutely necessary and rerouted all that power to the shields. Life support, internal lights, even the gravity in some sections, all of it went to keeping the shields up. The shields held. Barely. For 3 long seconds, the Valiant was wrapped in fire. Hull plating melted, systems overloaded. Crew members were thrown from their stations. Then the beam stopped. The Valiant drifted, smoking and damaged, but still intact. Jake pulled himself back into his chair. His head was bleeding from where he had hit the armrest. "Status report," he called out. "Shields are gone. Hull breaches on multiple decks. Weapons at 60%. Engines nominal," Lisa rattled off. "Captain, we need to retreat." Jake looked at the view screen. The first enemy ship they had been fighting was heavily damaged, drifting and venting atmosphere. The second was pulling back. But the third ship, the one with that terrible weapon, was turning toward them again. Jake thought about the Gentari on the surface. He thought about the distress call. He thought about what it meant to be human, to be from a death world where giving up was not an option. "No," he said quietly. "We're not retreating." "Amy, set course for that third ship." "Full speed." The bridge crew stared at him. Lisa opened her mouth to object, then closed it. She saw the look in Jake's eyes and understood. "Henry," Jake said over the intercom, "get your Marines ready. We're going to board that ship." There was a pause, then Henry's voice came back, filled with grim satisfaction. "Understood, Captain. We'll be ready." The damaged Valiant turned and accelerated toward the enemy flagship. It was an insane plan, but if there was one thing humans were good at, it was doing the impossible. The bridge of the UESS Valiant was quiet that morning. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair, watching the stars drift past on the main view screen. His ship had been on patrol for 3 weeks now, cruising along the edge of known space. Nothing exciting had happened. Nothing ever happened out here. Jake was 42 years old, with gray eyes and short brown hair that was starting to show silver at the temples. He had been in space for 20 years, ever since humanity joined the Galactic Council. The Council was a group of alien species who worked together to keep peace in the galaxy. Humans were the newest members, and some of the older species still did not trust them. Humans had a reputation. Earth was what the aliens called a death world. It was a dangerous place with storms, earthquakes, and animals that could kill you. Most alien species came from nice, gentle planets. They thought humans were tough and a little bit scary. Some thought humans were too violent, too quick to fight. Jake did not think of himself as violent. He just wanted to do his job and keep his crew safe. His second in command was Commander Lisa Harper. She was smart and good at planning. She sat at the tactical station, running practice drills to keep the weapons crew sharp. Lieutenant Kevin Shaw worked at the communications station. He was young, maybe 25, with red hair and freckles. He spent most of his time listening to radio signals from nearby ships and stations. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. That morning, Kevin suddenly sat up straight. His fingers flew across his console. Jake noticed the change immediately. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," Kevin said. His voice was tense. "What kind of strange?" Jake asked. "A distress signal? It's weak and full of static, but it's definitely there. The source is the Gentari system." Jake felt his stomach tighten. The Gentari were one of the founding members of the Galactic Council. They were insect-like aliens, about 4 feet tall, with hard shells that looked like colored glass. They were peaceful people who built beautiful cities and never fought wars. The idea of them sending a distress signal was almost impossible to believe. "Clean it up," Jake ordered. "I want to hear what they're saying." Kevin worked for several minutes, running the signal through filters and processors. Slowly the static cleared. A voice came through the speakers. It was mechanical, translated from the Gentari's clicking language into English. The word sent chills down Jake's spine. This is Gentari Prime. We are under attack. Unknown ships appeared in orbit 3 hours ago. Our defenses are destroyed. They are bombing our cities. Millions are dead. Please, anyone who can hear this, we need help. We are dying. The message repeated 2 more times, then cut off. The bridge was silent. Jake looked around at his crew. He saw shock on their faces and anger. Lisa stood up from her station. How far away are they? Jake asked. 8 hours at maximum speed, Lisa said. But we're outside our patrol zone. Council regulations say we need permission to leave our assigned area. Jake nodded. He knew the rules. The Galactic Council moved slowly. They liked to talk things through, make plans, vote on decisions. That was fine for normal situations, but this was not normal. By the time the Council authorized a rescue mission, the Gentari might all be dead. Send the distress signal to Council Command, Jake said. Request permission to investigate. Kevin sent the message. Then they waited. 40 minutes passed. It felt like forever. Finally, a response came through. Ambassador Telvin appeared on the main screen. He was a Valorian with silver skin and large dark eyes. He looked worried, but his voice was calm. Captain Morrison, we have received the distress signal. The Council is meeting right now to discuss the situation. All ships are ordered to maintain their current positions until we decide on a course of action. Thank you for your report. The screen went dark. Jake stared at it for a moment. He could feel his crew watching him, waiting for his decision. He thought about the Gentari. He had met some of them at diplomatic meetings. They were kind, gentle people who loved art and music. They did not deserve to die while the Council debated. Jake stood up. Set course for the Gentari system. Maximum speed, Lisa looked at him. Captain, that's a direct violation of orders. I know, Jake said. But I'm not going to sit here while people die. If the Council wants to court-martial me when this is over, that's fine. But right now, we're the only help those people are going to get. Lisa smiled. It was not a happy smile, but one of understanding. Aye, Captain. Setting course now. The Valiant turned and accelerated toward the Gentari system. The engines hummed as they pushed the ship faster and faster. Jake sat back down in his command chair. He knew he had just ended his career, but he did not care. Some things were more important than following rules. Kevin sent a message to Council Command, Jake said. Tell them we experienced a navigation malfunction and lost communication. We'll restore contact when we can. It was a lie. Everyone on the bridge knew it. But no one objected. Kevin sent the message without hesitation. Jake called a meeting with his senior officers. They gathered in the conference room behind the bridge. Lisa brought up a star map showing the Gentari system. There was not much information to work with. We don't know who we're facing, Lisa said. The Gentari said their orbital defenses were destroyed. That means these attackers have serious firepower. Lieutenant Colonel Henry Briggs, the Marine commander, leaned forward. He was a big man with a shaved head and scars on his hands. If we're going in blind, we need to be ready for anything. I'll have my Marines prepared for boarding actions or ground operations. Dr. Sarah Mitchell spoke up. She was the chief medical officer, a woman in her 50s with gray hair tied back in a bun. The Gentari have very different biology from us. If we're treating wounded, standard procedures might not work. I'll need time to review their medical files. Do what you can, Jake said. We have 8 hours. Use them wisely. The crew spent those 8 hours preparing. Engineers checked every system on the ship. Weapons crews loaded missiles and charged the railguns. The Marines cleaned their rifles and checked their armor. In the medical bay, Dr. Mitchell and her staff set up emergency triage stations. Jake walked through the ship talking to his crew. He saw determination on their faces, but also fear. They all knew they might be flying into a battle they could not win. But they also knew they were doing the right thing. In the pilot station, Lieutenant Amy Chen ran combat simulations. She was the best pilot in the fleet, able to make the heavy cruiser dance like a fighter. She looked up when Jake approached. Ready, Captain, she said simply. Jake nodded. He did not need to say anything more. His crew understood. As the hours passed, Jake sat alone in his quarters. He thought about his decision. He could still turn back. He could follow orders and wait for the Council. But when he closed his eyes, he heard that distress signal again. He heard the fear and desperation in that mechanical voice. No, he had made the right choice. Whatever happened next, he could live with it. The alarm sounded. They were approaching the Gentari system. Jake returned to the bridge and took his seat. The view screen showed empty space, but sensors were already picking up debris. Dropping out of faster than light in 30 seconds, Amy announced. Jake gripped the armrests of his chair. All hands battle stations. The ship shuddered as it dropped back into normal space. The view screen filled with the Jantari system, and what Jake saw made his blood run cold.